Assalamu alaikum. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Musab Abdali. I'm from Houston, Texas. I went to NNCC for the first time in 2011, and I never missed NNCC. This year I'm 25, so this would have been my last NNCC as a member of YM. Found out a couple months ago that I won't be able to make it, so I called Omar Tariq and I told him, hey man, can't come to NNCC this year. So he said, man, I would have, since this is your last one, I would have had you share some experiences, but since you can't make it, please send a video. So just because he asked, I'm sending him this video. It's very sad, and I'm regretful that I can't come to NNCC this year, especially since in the home state of Muhammad Ali, World Heavyweight Champ. And especially since this year, you guys are honored with the presence of my personal teacher and mentor, and the guy I looked up to since I was 8 years old, the Honorable Imam Khalid Griggs. Nonetheless, I mean, it's NNCC is always a great time of year, and even though I'm not there, I'm there in spirit, I guess you could say, and I feel that brotherhood still. I just wanted to share a couple experiences from YM and what YM did for me. I was just a 14-year-old kid who had read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I was obsessed with Malcolm X and all these figures from Black history in America, and I was obsessed with many of the Muslim personalities from Islamic history, and I was very inspired by these revolutionary people, and I wanted to find somewhere where I can put this together, and YM was that avenue for me. And at that time, a lot of people have asked me, like Omar Tariq asked me and a bunch of other people, why do you have this us against the world mentality when it comes to YM? Why do you have this mentality that everyone else hates us? And to be honest, if I gotta explain that, I'm going to share some very sensitive information that I probably wouldn't share with anyone who's not in YM. But since you guys are all members of YM, I can trust you all with this, what I consider privileged information. In 2007, when we were asked to start YM, there was a brother from ICNA who came to like 5 or 6 of us young guys. I was only 14. I was the youngest out of the group. And they said, look, we got to start YM. I didn't know what YM was. I didn't know what it stood for. But he said, look, you guys got to start it because there's nothing like YM in Houston at the time. And what I found out later was that this wasn't the first time YM was starting in Houston. There was YM around was in the 90s, and it tried to make a comeback, in the mid-2000s. But in 2007, when we restarted YM, alhamdulillah, that was the last time we were ever going to start YM, and it's still there to this day, alhamdulillah, through the grace of Allah. But the first time that it started in the 90s, YM was the biggest youth organization in the city. And then because the politics in the Muslim community in Houston, it fell apart. Then in the mid-2000s, a group of young brothers tried to restart YM, and they tried their best. But because they got in some trouble with the law, they ended up going to jail, and YM fell apart again. So in 2007, we were starting YM. And at that time, when we started the youth group, there was a lot of politics still in the city. So what we did was, for the first 2 years, we were a straight study circle. For the first 2 years, meeting every single week with the Murabbi. And then we later branched out and became Neighbor Nets. But at that time, when we had YM was being established, it was a very tough time. I became the YM Houston coordinator. And it was extremely tough because we were trying to start YM, and guys my age wouldn't take me seriously. I was like 15, 16 years old. Older guys wouldn't take us seriously because they knew the history of it. There were brothers who were going around and spreading rumors that YM is the front for selling drugs in Houston. There are people that were warning their kids, don't go to YM, because the last group of kids that went to YM, they ended up getting caught by the FBI and are in jail now. That was the type of stuff that we were facing. A lot of ugly politics and things like that. But what we realized is, in YM, we don't care about all that stuff. We're just trying to do work for the sake of the youth, serving Allah. That's our only job. And so that's what we dedicated ourselves to. So every Friday, after school, I'd go pick up my trusty sidekick and secretary, Maz Hassan. I'd pick him up from his high school, and then we'd go and embark on all these neighbor nets that we were establishing in the city. And something that happened, I realized that you can only depend on your own selves. You can only depend on yourself and your core team members. They will always have your back. A lot of other people, they're going to try to give you advice. They're going to try to give you words of wisdom. At the end of the day, the people you can truly count on are the ones who are committed to YM. That's my personal experience. That's what I found, that these brothers, I could count on anything. And so that was a lesson that I learned. Another thing that happened was, because we couldn't get older guys to join YM, they wouldn't take us seriously at that time in like 2008, 2009. We ended up, I went to my masjid, tried to get the 15, 16, 17-year-old guys to join YM. They didn't want to join. So I said, fine. Went and found a bunch of 12 and 13-year-old kids who were interested in this, who were sold on the mission of YM, who established neighborhoods on their own. There was a 12-year-old kid who lived in this very remote part of the city, 40 miles away from me. And I remember he would gather the guys outside of his house, in front of his apartment. He would gather 20 to 25 guys every single week. And every single week, Maz and myself would drive over there, those 40 miles through rush hour traffic, and we'd go there and we'd have a neighbor night with them, and we'd chill with them, we'd hang out with them. And we did that all over the city. And we knew what we were doing this for. We had YM National, we were constantly talking to them. I ended up even being on the National Shura for one term with them. And so I knew that there was something at the end of this. I knew that one day YM would be bigger than what all these people, all these naysayers are saying that it's going to be. I remember friends that I grew up with who were my age, who were older than me. They would say, "What are you doing this weekend? You're wasting your time babysitting again?" I remember there was a guy who was interested in joining YM. He was older than me. So I took him to this neighborhood one time. And there was a bunch of 12, 13-year-old kids running around, messing around. And he's like, "Seriously, this is what you do every weekend?" And I said, "Yeah, this is what I do every weekend. This is my life, and I enjoy this type of stuff." Because I knew that there was something in addition to it. And I remember that guy, when we were just hanging out with all like my high school friends, he said, "Yeah, this guy, he goes and plays with kids every week." And at that time, I was kind of angry, but you know what? I look back now, and this is something that I would talk to guys at NNCC from all over the country, and they'd say, we have the same issues sometimes when we're starting new subregions, when we're starting new neighborhoods. We have these same issues. But, I'm not at NNCC this year, but I can tell you one thing. There's about 20 guys that went from Houston, and I can say over half of them are members of those 12, 13-year-old kids that once were in YM, and, they were those kids who we used to play with. Today, they're neighborhood coordinators. They're SR coordinators. They're doing work for the sake of Allah, and that's all that matters. At that time, we could have looked at them and said, "These are just a bunch of kids." No, we saw the potential in them. We saw that if we spend time with them, we sell them on this mission, we have them involved in the neighborhoods and in the study circles, they will grow as individuals, and they will carry this organization further than we ever could. And that's the reality right now. The way that YM Houston is operating right now, I could never done that in a million years. But those guys grew up in YM. They live, breathe, and they will die YM. So that's the lesson that I learned. All these years, there's a lot of people who were naysayers who would, do whatever they could to kind of knock you down. And I don't know for what reason. I guess it was just shaitan trying to divide us. But that's something that we could never be sold on. We have a mission. We're doing this work for the sake of Allah. We'll not be fazed by other individuals who are, whatever it may be, who are trying to knock us off that path. That's our responsibility. So when these guys came and said, "Why do you have this us against the world mentality in YM?" That's the reason why. The entire time there were people who were not in our organization who were just trying to knock us down. And that's something that we just have to persevere through. And the last thing that I'll say is, in YM we are taught the concept from the Sirah, from the Sunnah, that a true believer, a true Islamic worker, will not seek nor desire leadership. And I didn't understand that at first. I wanted to be a coordinator. I wanted to be a leader. But then when I became SR coordinator for 4 years, and that's not, an impressive thing to do. I was SR coordinator for 4 years because I failed every single year. A good SR coordinator will not just get the job done. By the time he's done with this term, he's going to have 10 potential SR coordinators. That's something that I failed to do every single year. That's why I had to do 4 terms. But after 4 terms as SR coordinator, after 1 term on the National Shura, after being the program chair of the youth conference in 2012, now that I look back at it, I promise you one thing: I will never seek nor desire leadership again. It is one of the biggest burdens ever. And I thank Allah for putting me in that position, and I pray to Allah that I'm able to be held, to be successful when I'm held accountable for it. I ask that Allah helps us all. And I'll finish with one thing: everything that I've done for YM, it's no favor that I've done upon anyone else. All that driving and everything that we did in YM, all those days and those nights that we spent doing work for the sake of Allah through YM, I promise you it's not my favor upon anyone. As Allah tells us in the Quran, when He asked the Prophet ﷺ to address the hypocrites were saying, "We are doing Muhammad a favor by being Muslim." Allah told the Prophet ﷺ to go and tell them, "No, you are not doing Islam, you're not doing Allah a favor by being a Muslim. It is Allah's favor upon you. So it's not my favor upon YM or upon Allah for the work that I've done. It is truly Allah's favor upon me that He allowed me to be involved in YM this long. It kept me out of trouble. It, kept me out of a lot of problems that I could have been involved in. And I'm not gonna cry and say YM saved my life, because Subhan Tariq already did that at Youth Conference in 2012. But what I will say is that for all of you, who are still doing work for the sake of Allah and YM, remember, don't let the haters phase you. Don't let shaitan divide you guys up. Your closest ally, your closest confidant are those fellow brothers in YM. And not just in your city, not just in your neighborhood, but all over the country. This is a beautiful brotherhood. YM is the greatest organization that I've ever had the pleasure of being part of. And I ask that Allah, blesses us all and gives us success. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.